Today we'll be looking at the seven errors of Egypt, and um, it's a Bible story. It's inspired by the story of Joseph during the Great Recession. It's inspired by the efforts Joseph made to transform Egypt from a low-class nation to a high-class nation, and probably a world power, a reference point when it comes to food. Pharaoh had had a dream. Joseph was a prison boy of no essence and all that. And then Pharaoh needed the dream to be interpreted. Now, it's not too much of the interpretation, but it's about the consequence of the interpretation. Now, we know that just for the reference, Pharaoh had had two kinds of dream in one night. One dream was seven lean cows and then seven fat cows. And the seven lean cows consumed the seven fat cows. And amazingly, they didn't even seem like anything had happened. They didn't seem like they had eaten anything. They were still very, very scraggy, very lean. And then he had another dream of wheat, okay, and then 7 years of impoverished wheat, okay, consuming another seven very good looking wheat, okay, ears of wheat. And he was alarmed. Now Joseph was brought in after the magicians and all that. Now that's not of too much importance, right? What is important is Joseph had interpreted Pharaoh's dream, and Pharaoh saw the need to invest in his interpretation. He was called up, he became prime minister. Now we're talking about the mistakes that Egypt as a nation made as a reply, as a response to this interpretation. Now Joseph had interpreted this to mean 7 years of plenty, 7 years of wealth, national wealth, food production, amazing harvests, unprecedented harvests, expansive barns, expansive food surplus, good yield. And then there would be the 7 years of famine when everything would just go. We wouldn't enjoy as much production, food supply as we had previously. Now, this was the wisdom. Joseph advised Pharaoh, why don't you set up barns and storage facilities, storage systems we put in place so that we produce excess, beyond what the ground could provide. We do everything we can to not just waste the excess, but ensure that whatever is provided for is stored. You eat what you ought to eat, and then you store the rest, in your barns, in your silos, in your storage facilities, whatever you can provide. And so let's invest the first 7 years with a conscious mind, with intentionality, that the 7 lean years will come. It's not just a farm party. Oh, there's excess production, let's party, let's begin to do what we've not done before, let's begin to eat what we've not eaten before. It's not just about that. It's about having that consciousness that 7 lean years would come. Now, I would want to quickly state that there are 2 seasons in the life of every man: the season of plenty and the season of lack. And so this calls us to circumspection. So when you earn your salary, for example, your salary is earned one day. How do you manage your salary through the rest of the month? Because for every other day of the month, whether it's 28 days or 30 days or 31 days, you would not be earning. You may not be earning something. Okay, so how do you manage your earnings to ensure that you can carry through with feeding and running your family for the rest of the month? And that's what brings this to most importance. Because for the individual or for the community or for the nation, one, there should be a sense of work, a sense of duty, a sense of production. So no one should be idle. You can't be idle and expect to also eat. In fact, even the same Bible says, he who does not work should not eat. So there should be a sense of productivity. And I think it's a clarion call to the nations to begin to enhance their productive factor. Every nation should sit down and say, beyond the natural resources, beyond the oil and gold and all bitumen and all the natural resources that mineral resources were endowed with. Okay, we're talking about food. Whether you earn income in natural resources or you provide food, everyone should identify with the basics. Productivity. How productive is your land? How productive is your nation? Now, the productivity index of every nation varies from nation to nation, but what's important is you produce something. Now, what you produce, is it enough to cater to the needs of the citizenry? That's a question leadership should ask. And not much dependency on aid and supply. Now, I like the fact that Joseph could sit down and explore possibilities of looking inwards and providing help. Now, this famine was not necessarily a local famine. It wasn't limited to Egypt. It was probably a global concern. But what trips me here is Joseph's ability to sit over and make calculations to provide food, probably not just for the Egyptian environment, but also considering the possibility of having foreigners come procure food. You could see that when the season of scarcity or famine began, you could see people from other nations come in to buy food, and all of this began to provide wealth for Egypt. So what am I saying? I'm saying that every nation should sit back. Leadership of the nation, whatever the nation is, whatever your nation is, especially nations in Africa, because we have this habit of relaxing whenever we feel there's a windfall. So sometimes the price of oil for those of us in Nigeria, okay, when the price of oil, when there's an oil boom, then we want to talk about excess crude reserves, and then we just want to, do whatever it is we want to do. We want to waste all the money, all the earnings from this, and then when things go sour, then we want to look for aids, want to look for help from foreign lands, from foreign nations, from developed countries to come to our aid. We can live above that. We can actually live above that through wisdom in planning our resources and our earnings. Now, I'd like to say very quickly that you have an excess to your purse, that you have a very fat purse, does not mean you would not suffer leanness. And so why it wouldn't show for some nations is they divest their resources. Okay, I'm getting this from this. Can we not invest in creating other sources of income? Just like we advise human beings to create multiple sources of income, nations should make it a deliberate effort, okay, to understand that there will be a future when your primary source of earning may not even be the thing. So why don't you begin to look beyond the now and look to some 10, 20, 100 years from now? What would your economy be like? What would the world's economy be like? You could invest in other things. You could invest in technology. You could invest in other products that the world would come to harvest from. You could invest in ideas, innovations that would create wealth, that would impact on the wealth factor, the earning factor of the economy. Now, just for Joseph, it was about 7 years. And so there were 7 years of surplus. And then Joseph began to invest for the other 7 years. Well, he walked with a sense of revelation. I don't know what revelation we are disposed to. Okay, I don't know what revelation we would respond to. I don't know what we ignore. But I'm sure that intelligence gathering is a thing, and every leadership of every nation enjoys the benefit of information. And they sit over with their leadership, with their ministers, with the cabinet, and they begin to explore. But I really don't understand what they discuss out there when, you have a tenure system, for example. You have an administration come and go, and then they're lacking in real-time solutions, real-time answers. Okay, because I'm sure you can count on the fact that every nation is blessed with answers within. Not all of your answers will come from abroad. And so the primary concern of leadership is to identify with localized answers to localized problems. Now, if you can't find that immediately, you could begin to reach out to near spaces, neighboring countries. What are you doing? What are you doing? You could send a few of your citizens, a few experts to go into some countries of interest to ask them questions. How are you doing this? How are you doing that? At the end of which, you come back and you begin to invest. Nations have done that. China has done that. India is doing that now. They send experts to other countries. Go study your systems. Go study their systems. They come back and say, we can do this. We can deploy these same answers, these same solutions to our nation. What is important is solving problems, especially food scarcity problems, especially economic problems. So let's explore very quickly 7 errors of ancient Egypt. I would vote on the fact that the Egypt of today is no longer making some of those mistakes. Okay, and nations have outgrown some of those mistakes. But what's saddening is when you look around Africa and you realize that a lot of African countries are still saddled with the same errors more than 5,000 years. You don't seem to think that there is any likely improvement, around the way we structure our governance systems. we structure our solutions, we seem rather aid dependent. And I think the clarion call is for us to begin after this message to think inwards, to look inwards, and provide our own solutions. Let's get to that day when we would say to the West, hey, we really don't need your aid. We can do these things on our own, whatever the battle is. Okay, they say the foreign countries are interest based, so whatever their interest is, let there be better negotiations from a standpoint of sufficiency, and then we can collaborate. We're no longer their slaves. There's no more neo-colonialism. They're no longer imposing governments on us. They're no longer insisting on the way we should conduct our affairs, elections, and all that, because we would have come of age. Coming of age is not just about national pride. It's not just about population size. It should be about substance and what answers we can provide for ourselves. And then, most importantly, what we can sell to the rest of the world.